I am Nancy Cordes. I'm the congressional correspondent for CBS News, and I am incredibly honored to be sitting here today with 5 women who truly exemplify the theme of our next panel, which is leading the charge. These women have taken the reins of roles and industries that have not traditionally been led by women: business, technology, politics, science, policing. And so we're going to learn a little bit more today about how they got where they are and what advice they can give us. First, to my left, I have Carly Fiorina, of course, the chairman of Good 360 and the former chairman and CEO of Hewlett-Packard. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York. Linda Hudson, the CEO of BAE Systems. Cathy Lanier, the chief of police of the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department. I'm a local girl. Go D.C. And Elizabeth Robinson, who is the CFO of NASA. And Carly, yes, big round of applause for everybody. Carly, since you're sitting next to me, maybe you can start. I want to ask all of you to talk a little bit about the challenges that you faced as a woman when you were starting out in your career, and maybe when you were making your way to the top of your career, and also how you used the innate strengths that make women so clearly superior to overcome those challenges and rise to the top. You started out as a secretary at Hewlett-Packard and became the CEO of what was the largest technology company in the world.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to be with you, and I'm so honored to join everyone else on this panel. So I did, in fact, start as a secretary. I got a degree in medieval history and philosophy, so I was unemployable. Went to law school, hated it, dropped out, and went back to work as a secretary. I was a very good secretary and actually worked full-time for a small business. I, at the time, had no plan to do anything other than to pay the rent. And I learned a lot in that job. And at a critical moment, maybe 6 months in, 2 men who worked there, it was a very small business, 9 people, came to my desk and said, you know, we've been watching you, maybe you could do something more than type and file. Do you want to learn about what we do? And that was my introduction to business. So from that very humble beginning, let me just say there are a couple really important things I learned from that. First of all, there is an opportunity in every job. You have to see it. And there are people in life who see constraints in the job they have, and then there are people who see possibilities in the job they have. See the possibilities in whatever job you do. Second, do a really good job at whatever job you have, and people will take notice. And when they take notice, whether you're a secretary or something else, opportunity is going to knock. And when it knocks, don't be afraid to walk through the door. And the third thing I would say from that experience is that people will take a chance on you. And sometimes they're unexpected people. And when people take a chance on you, step to the occasion. Even if it means you have to try something different, learn something new, don't be afraid to take a risk and try something new. I see women sometimes get pigeonholed and be afraid to try something new. Don't be. Life's a great adventure. You have a lot to give.
Was there something that you were afraid to try that you
I was afraid of
anyway?
I was afraid of many things. And I think fear is kind of common, but I have been afraid of many things. Afraid of making mistakes, afraid of looking foolish, afraid of being criticized. And guess what? All of those things happen to all of us. So the question is, what do you do when it happens? Well, you learn from your mistakes, you pick yourself up and dust yourself off, and you come to know that criticism isn't fatal. Sometimes there are things in the criticism that you should learn something from, and sometimes it's best to ignore it and keep going because they're wrong and you're right.
Senator Gillibrand, how did you take advantage of those opportunities that came your way?
Well, politics is still very male-dominated. In the Congress today, there's only 20 women out of 100 in the U.S. Senate, and there's only 18% in the House of Representatives. Obviously, that's not representative of America. If it was 51% of women in Congress, we wouldn't waste time debating access to contraception. We would talk about the economy. We would talk about national would be different, but I had great role models and mentors when I was looking at politics. My best role model was my grandmother, who loved politics, got involved as a young woman, a secretary in our state legislature. And at a very, very male-dominated time, 75 years ago, she decided that while her voice might have been important, what was more important is the voice of many women. And so she organized all the women of the legislature and then all the women in her community to get involved in politics. So she gave me a lot of life lessons as a young girl, mostly to not be afraid, to fight hard, fight for what you believe in, do not be afraid. And she was fearless. And so when I ran my first campaign, I wasn't afraid. And many people who were very wise and knowledgeable said, Kirsten, this is a tough race. This individual you're running against is going to run a very dirty race. This shouldn't be your first race. And I didn't care. I said, I want to raise the debate. I want to raise these issues. I want to offer myself as a public servant, and this is a fight worth fighting. And so I did. So taking risks is important. Not being afraid is important. Look for those role models. See how other women have done it. Find those mentors. Find those sponsors. Listen, take advice. But as Carly said, you have to be bold and step forward and know that your voice is important, that what you are bringing to the debate, whether it's politics or being on the local school board, is essential because your life experience is different than those who are there. With so few women being represented, issues like equal pay for equal work never make the top 10. Issues like paid family medical leave isn't a reality in this country for very few women. Making sure you have affordable daycare, universal pre-K, all of those issues are issues that we as mothers, we as women, we as daughters instinctively know are important. They're not on the top 10 list at all, except for today in President Obama's speech. He talked about every single one of those issues today, which is really exciting.
But he hasn't talked about military sexual assaults.
No, but he may in the future with encouragement from all of you. Yeah.
Linda Hudson, you were the first female CEO of a major defense company. How did you climb the ranks? How did being a woman hurt you? How did it help you to get where you are?
You know, I grew up in the 50s and 60s where it was not okay for young girls to like science and math, except I like science and math. And it was the formative days of the space program, and I just fell in love with everything associated with airplanes and rockets and desperately wanted to be a pilot and then an astronaut. But in those days, it just wasn't a realistic possibility. My parents encouraged me to pursue my dreams, and I went on to be one of 2 women at the University of Florida in the College of Engineering. And I decided if I couldn't fly airplanes or go up in space, I could design them. So I started my career as a design engineer in 1972. And right away, I realized that all the people I worked with didn't really think I should be there. And it was an early lesson in coping skills and resilience and finding a way to prove them wrong. And I learned early on that nothing succeeds like excellence. Do your job and do it really well, as Carly said. And what I found was my bosses would overlook the fact that I was female if I was really, really good, because it helped them succeed, and in turn it helped me succeed. And as opportunities came along, much like Carly said, I never turned down an opportunity that came my way, no matter how odd it might seem or how difficult it might appear. And over time, you know, building relationships, learning influencing skills when you didn't have power, which none of us did in the early days, have just served me well as I've moved up through the whole corporate culture, and keeping in mind that in the end, what really matters is doing what you do well and realizing the importance of relationships, and that, you know, people can't put you down, and you're going to prove them wrong if they try. So.
When you started out, did it even cross your mind that you could be the CEO of a company like this one day? At what point in your career did you think, you know, I don't want to just be among the leaders, I want to be the leader?
In the beginning, I had absolutely no such expectation. It was beyond the realm of the possible. I just wanted to be the best engineer I could possibly be. And as time went on, some enlightened men took some chances on me and gave me opportunities, and I realized along the way that I love the people part of the job. I get a tremendous amount of satisfaction working with teams of people and getting them moving in the same direction and accomplishing things that no one thought was possible. It didn't really occur to me that I would ever be in this job. I don't really think until the opportunity presented itself, and you know, you do develop a sense of pragmatism, I guess, along the way, that I just never thought about the next job. I always thought about doing what I was doing really well, and then the opportunities would come along, and I'd take advantage of them. I just don't believe you can plan a career. Mm-hmm. I think you do the best you can and just be open-minded and ready to move when the opportunity comes.
Chief Lanier, you talk about how you started out as a teen mom and that you really went into policing partly because it's what your brother was doing, right? But also partly because you needed to provide for your family and figure out, you know, what kind of career you were going to build. How did you decide that you didn't want to just be in the police department, but that you wanted to lead the police department? And how did you help to change the culture there? Because it was a much different place when you started.
It was, I started almost 24 years ago. So I started walking a footbeat in Washington, D.C. in 1990. So for Washingtonians that have been here a while, I know how different a place this was in 1990. And government as a whole, there was a lot of things that were challenging. It was exactly that. For me as a single mom, it was survival first for my son and, to provide for my family. So I really didn't come on the police department to work my way up. I came on the police department because they had tuition reimbursement. and I needed to go back to school if I was going to be able to provide for my son. Because when I started on MPD, literally I had a 9th grade education. So I went back to school while I was working. The goal was to work my way up through the ranks so I could earn a little bit more money to help get my son in some better schools. So I put him in private school, worked my way up through the ranks and continued in school, and got 2 master's degrees over the course of the past 24 years since I've been here. And I think what everybody has said here is just so true. You don't look to, at least I did not ever look to lead the organization or to be in charge. I came to work every day and I worked very, very hard. And people recognize hard work, and a lot of people reach out and offer you opportunities, and a lot of people, want to support you and mentor you and give you chances to use what it is that you're good at. And I love policing. I love my community. I love what I do. I love the people that I interact with every day. And it was an opportunity for me to give my son a better life than I had growing up. And so it just was hard work. And I've loved what I've done. I didn't realize I was going to be the chief till the day I was offered the job. But for me, there was never an image of a woman police chief either, which is one of the things I'm trying to change, because I never thought of being the police chief because there was never an image of a woman police chief leading a major city for me. So hopefully that will change now.
How do you recruit more women, even just to get their foot in the door and also to be out in more visible roles out on patrol? I notice usually, when I'm out and about, most of the patrol officers I see are men.
Yeah. Well, some of that's our fault, women, and some of it is kind of typecasting, I think, a little bit. We have a pretty good representation in our agency. We're about 22% women, which is very high for a law enforcement agency. It's much, much smaller as you move up the ranks. I think a lot of women are still very intimidated and afraid to take some risk. It is still tough. This is still a profession that is extremely male-dominated and still has a lot of very opinionated men, the opposite of enlightened men. But honestly, I have to say the risk-taking is the key part of it, because I think in uniformed services like law enforcement, firefighting, the military, if you work really hard and you do your job, the men that you work alongside, regardless of what personalities they have, they respect you and they don't really care whether you're a woman or not. If they're going to go to work every day and trust you to do the job as well as everybody else, they really don't care. Mm-hmm. So my experience has been that sometimes the women hold themselves back, and sometimes the men in the higher positions always try and push women in law enforcement into the female police officer jobs, administrative jobs, communications, working with children, which are all important jobs. But I think for me, my entire career, I fought to stay in uniform patrol, in the field, special operations, narcotics, doing the things that I came here to be a police officer, not a secretary.
Elizabeth, are you the highest ranking woman at NASA ever?
Not ever, but currently, yes.
So tell us a little bit about your experience.
Okay, well, I came up through the science ranks, and then I was on the Hill, probably like many of you were or are. And then I actually went to OMB. I heard you heard from Sylvia Burrell this morning. OMB, like many places where there is just a lot of work, is a meritocracy. I think you mentioned that when there's a lot of work, people tend to lose track of the more surface things, and the more work you do, the more you're appreciated. And so that was a great place to be for a while. And for the last 4 years, I've been the CFO at NASA. NASA is a part of the aeronautics community, which is not balanced in terms of gender at the moment. You've talked about many things about career paths and all of that. I think one of the other things, and you've talked about attitude, and attitude. I mean, it's true sort of at every point in your career. And I do think that one of the things that happens as you go up in the ranks is that the attitude does moderate somewhat. You need to learn to have that place of self-certainty that you go to as the leader, because you will be challenged and will be tried to put off your rocker. Of course, I'm the CFO. CFOs, you know, everyone already knows how to spend their money, so when they come to you, they want someone else's money, or they want to figure out a way to do something without spending money, you know, things like that. And so, you know, you have to be certain, and you have to be able to go to that place and be that calm person of authority. And I got to say, the best training for that was being a mom. So I do think women do have a great training ground for when your 2-year-old yet again asks you for, you know, to go out or something, and you take that deep breath, and you're like, okay. You start to develop that sense. And so I do think that's something that women can learn over their career, and it really serves them well as you go up the ranks.
Speaking of being a mom, do you all feel like your career sort of was this steady trajectory up, or did you feel like, you know, it sort of plateaued and then took big jumps? I suspect it's the latter, but talk a little bit about how you managed your career given everything else that was going on in your lives.
Well, I think the age-old question, or the age-old search for the silver bullet on work-life balance, and there is no silver bullet. And balancing work and life and the many roles that women play is never easy for anyone. And for me, I think there came a moment in my life when I realized that the only person who could make those choices was me. And when I realized that no one was going to protect me but me, and I also realized that no matter what choice I made, someone was going to be unhappy. Somebody was going to be unhappy. Someone in the family, someone at work, someone would wish they had more of me. And so I think part of it is coming to grips with the fact that the work-life balance issue is an issue we each have to own for ourselves. We have to make those choices every day. You have to learn to live with the fact that not everyone's going to be happy with the choice that you make. But in the end, our life is about our choices. And so coming to grips with that, I think, helped. No one will do it for you. You have to do it for yourself.
I was going to say, I gave up on the idea of work-life balance a long time
Yeah, my
ago.
husband would say not.
and I prefer to refer to it as work-life integration. You just kind of got to figure out a way to get it all done. And it is priorities, and only you can make the priorities. And, you know, for many of us, the most important years of our career were the earlier years when we were establishing ourselves. And I have a daughter, and she will tell you from her perspective that she lost out a lot in those early years. But somehow we managed to work our way through it. She's grown. She has children of her own. She understands a lot more now than she did then about the challenges. And you know, somehow we managed to get our way through. But it's not somebody else's problem to solve. I agree. It's it's ours to make the choices that are important to us.
Isn't that what makes the women, though, kind of stand out? If you think about, people always ask me, how did you balance the work-life thing, as a single parent? I think what makes women stand out in a lot of aspects at work is that we're really good at multitasking because we have to multitask. And you're trying to keep your family going, take care of children, work and work so that you're providing adequately for your family. And multitasking is what we do. I mean, I know all day long, I kind of joke and say I've got the worst case of ADD, but that's what's required in my job. And so I think women do that very, very well. When I watch my employees, you watch those really committed, dedicated employees, women can multitask, unlike any man I've ever met. And when they are committed to a position, a job, or what they're doing, they are really committed. So I think that's what makes a lot of women stand out, because that family, raising children, and trying to get that balance is what allows us to be so effective.
Go ahead.
Also, I think, in many of the things we've talked about keeping your eye on the prize, right? And with kids, this is a long run, right? Mm-hmm. My kids are, one's out of college, and I have a kid in college now. And so it's many things along the way. It's not any one thing. And then the other thing is that there's some benefits, too. It's not all negative. I mean, my biggest fans are my kids. They love what I do. My daughter embarrasses me in front of her in front of her friends when she talks about what I do, and she talks about what it meant to her to have a successful mom. She's like, "You've taught me how to do this. I know so much better." And so there's so many other parts of it. Not all of it's negative. In fact, what we do brings real positives to our kids. So we have to keep it all in mind.
Well, I definitely agree with that. And for my part, my job is much easier than a lot of women's jobs because I can set my own schedule. So I can bring my kids to school in the morning. I can pick them up in the afternoon. I can make dinner almost every night. If I need to be at an evening event, I'll get a sitter. But the reality is I'm much more worried about the woman who's going to clean this ballroom tonight. And she doesn't get to set her hours. She may well be on the minimum wage. I met a woman who cleans Union Station. She'd been working in that job for 20 years, never made more than the minimum wage, never had a sick day, didn't have benefits, and it was a government contract. So give me a break. I'm really worried about the nature of the workforce has changed so dramatically. So in the 1950s and 60s, if you had 10 houses on a block, literally 7 or 8 of those houses, the man went to work, the wife stayed home. Today on that block, 5 families, the husband and wife both work, 2 women stay at home, and 3 is single moms doing everything. So, I hate this phrase, having it all, because that's like you're talking about having a piece of pie. No, you're not having anything. You're doing it all because you want to provide for your child. You want to make sure your son has every opportunity in the world, and so you work hard every day. And so what I'm focused on right now is changing the workplace rules to reflect the workforce. It's women. We're 52% of the population. We're nearly 50% of the workforce. And in fact, we are earning more than half of the college degrees, more than half of the advanced degrees. And so if you're not building a workplace that supports women, you're not supporting the U.S. economy. So if you're not providing paid family medical leave, so when you have a baby, or your parent gets ill, or someone in your family, or your husband's deployed, if you don't provide that flexibility and pay that woman during that time, you likely lose her. Because if her mother's dying, or she just had a baby, she may well need time. And if your employer doesn't pay that time, she can't afford not to be working. You may also, something as simple as universal pre-K or affordable daycare, structurally necessary. Because if you don't have affordable daycare and you're earning the minimum wage today is $15,000 a year. 17 million women earn the minimum wage today. 17 million. That means you're working 40 hours a week, you make $15,000 a year. That is $3,000 below the poverty line if you have 2 kids. And it means if you need daycare, the average daycare in this country is $10,000 a year. You are priced out of affordable early childhood education and daycare.
I also think, just on this point, I do think that technology offers a great opportunity to integrate women more effectively in the workforce, to leverage women's incredible talents, because what technology allows companies or government, if they were enlightened enough to try something new, is to say, look, technology is the ultimate enabler of multitasking. And the truth is, you can do virtually 80% of most work, not all work, not the poor woman cleaning Union Station, but a lot of work can be done where you are. And so I think the aggressive use of technology to help enable everyone in the workforce to have a more flexible life is important as well.
Yeah, I think the best thing for women has been the invention of the BlackBerry or smartphone.
The best and the worst.
Yeah, right, because it meant you could go home. You know, you didn't have to wait around to see what your boss was going to do, and you know, and all of that. You could actually go to the place you needed to be and be able to respond those times you needed to respond.
You know, we're experimenting with a lot of different work styles to accommodate not just women, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We find our younger men expect the same degree of flexibility that women do, and I think that's healthy. I think it shows a change in society where perhaps parenting is being shared a bit more than it did when I was growing up, and it is so well received by the workforce when you listen to what they want in terms of work schedules or telecommuting or hoteling with office space or doing any of these kind of things. And frankly, I've found that productivity goes up.
Yes. That's
And
the key.
yeah, and
you
we've
actually
even
have a more loyal, productive workforce when you make family-friendly policies.
Absolutely, and we even find in some of our factories where you wouldn't think this would work, if we let work groups get together and figure out what is the best work schedule for them collectively. Yeah, if you're running a production line, you can't just decide when you're going to come and go. But if the group has more say in the way they go about their work schedules, productivities go up. Defense is not known for being, you know, the most forward-leaning industry, but we're trying to make a difference because I believe talent is the key discriminator in the competitive world today. And if we can attract the kind of talent that takes up the majority of the population, I think that's a winning combination.
If I could just say one other thing on this topic, because you mentioned not all of this is negative, and these choices are not at all negative. I mean, I think none of us, well, I'll speak for myself. I did not aspire to being one of those successful executives that becomes a CEO and has no life at all, no connection with family. I mean, that isn't something to aspire to. What's aspirational is to have a life in which each woman, every woman, any woman, has the opportunity to live the life she really chooses, has the opportunity to fulfill her potential, has the opportunity to form meaningful relationships in her family and with her friends, and that requires a lot of integration and a lot of choices, and the choices we make determine the life we live. I see so many women, not so many, but I do see women tend to get into this rut of, I gotta do it like the man does it. And you don't. You don't. You can do it in a way that works for you.
It strikes me that some of the issues you're talking about, Senator, might move to the top of the agenda if 50% of the Senate was made up of women.
Without a doubt.
What's the key to that? When you talk to female politicians, I'm sure you mentor them and talk to them. Are they held back from getting into the race because they don't want to run, or they think they can make a difference in another way, or is this just going to take time?
No, I created a whole political action committee just to do that work called Off the Sidelines, and my whole goal is to engage all women, Democrats and Republicans, in participating in politics, to vote, to become advocates on things they care about, and then to reach out and begin to help women who are running that I want to win, that can actually, I think, make a difference in the Senate and the House. And so I'm working hard on 6 Senate races this year, 3 of my colleagues running for re-election and 3 challengers. I'm going to pick a dozen House candidates that could run. And I was mentioning this to Carly when we came in. What I found in Congress is that women are such good consensus builders. Every time I'm working on a bill, it's Susan Collins, Republican from Maine, or Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, or a number, even Kelly Ayotte from New Hampshire, who we find the common ground very easily and then start from there. And so if we had more women in Congress, we would begin to break this cycle of dysfunction. If you just see constantly, Washington gets nothing done, there's constant bickering, partisan bickering, and it's often the women that break the logjam. This recent budget debate, it was Susan Collins who came up with a proposal that Patty Murray jumped at, and they started to work on it to make sure we open government again. That's what women bring to the table. It's that common sense. It's that ability to listen well, to find common ground, to build from there. And so my goal is to get our Congress up to 51%.
And, this is a place where sometimes women are afraid to step forward. But let's be realistic. The title of this panel notwithstanding, women do not rule. And while we have made huge progress in technology, obviously there's been progress. When I became the chairman and CEO of Hewlett-Packard, I was the only woman at the Fortune 50. There were 5 women in the Fortune 500. Today there are 12, okay? Progress. And you have women at Yahoo, at HP, at IBM, at Pepsi, et cetera. But if you look at women as corporate officers and board members, it's stuck at 16%. That number hasn't moved in 20 years. We have 20% of the women in positions, political positions. Women, from a global perspective, are the most subjugated and suppressed people in the world. Subjugated and suppressed. 70% of the people who live on less than $2 a day are women. In other words, the burdens of poverty always rest most heavily on women and their children in this country and elsewhere. And so despite this fantastic progress, there is demonstrably so much work left to do. And I think that work and sufficient progress only comes with women stepping out and making a difference wherever they are, working together to build consensus, working with the enlightened men, and there are a lot of them. But we still have a really long way to go.
I have to say on the consensus building, during the Washington Navy Yard incident that happened back on September 16th, I had at least 100 people ask me, Washington, D.C. having 32 or 33 law enforcement agencies, multiple jurisdictions represented. We have a DOD facility. You have FBI involvement. You've got local Metropolitan Police and the United States Park Police involved, along with about 19 federal agencies. And everybody says, well, it looks so flawless, from what we could see, that there was no, debating or fighting over who's in charge and all that. And, it was just very simple to me. The main players in that whole response to the Washington Navy Yard, and you can do the math. Okay, Cathy, Lanier, Valerie Parley from the FBI, and Teresa Chambers from the United States Park Police. Yeah. I mean, where's the math? And there was never any debate. There was no egos. We had a job to do, and we got the job done. And there was no debates or egos or, fighting over who's supposed to be doing what. And to me, it just seemed like that is what really the formula was.
Well, I think we will end it at that inspiring note. I would love to talk to you all for another hour, but they've got another panel coming on right behind us. So thank you all so much for being here today and sharing your insights. Appreciate it.